blue lights hit your rear-view mirror, sharp and sudden. Your chest tightens before your brain even catches up. You ease your foot off the gas, glance at your speedometer, then back at those lights flashing with authority. The road feels quieter than it should. You signal, pull over, and as your car rolls to a stop, your hand instinctively moves toward the ignition. And right there, that tiny, almost automatic decision can change everything. Let me ask you something before we go any further. Have you ever turned off your engine during a traffic stop because you thought it would make you look more respectful or cooperative? If you have, or even if you're not sure what you did in that moment, I want you to share that experience in the comments. What went through your mind? What did the officer say? Because later in this discussion, I'm going to break down exactly why that one small action, turning off your engine, can send a very different message than you think, and why it can actually work against you in ways most drivers never realize. Now, let's get into it. There's a widely accepted belief floating around that turning off your engine is a sign of compliance. People think it shows respect, that it signals, "I'm not going anywhere, officer." It feels polite, it feels safe, it feels like the right thing to do. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Law enforcement doesn't necessarily interpret that action the way you think they do. In fact, depending on the context, it can raise questions, trigger suspicion, and even complicate your legal position during the stop. And that's where things start to get interesting. When an officer initiates a traffic stop, they're not just pulling you over for a simple interaction. In their mind, they are entering a controlled, unpredictable environment. They don't know who you are. They don't know your intentions. They don't know if you're nervous because you got caught speeding or because you're hiding something far more serious. Everything you do in those first few seconds becomes data to them. The way you slow down, the way you pull over, how quickly you respond, whether your hands are visible, whether your movements are smooth or erratic, whether you immediately start digging around in your glove box before they even reach your window. And yes, whether you turn off your engine. Now think about this from their perspective. You pull over, and before the officer even approaches, you shut the car off. That might seem harmless, but it introduces uncertainty. Why did you do that? Are you trying to conceal something? Are you preparing for a longer encounter? Are you trying to control the pace of the interaction? Or, and this is where it gets more nuanced, are you about to step out of the vehicle? Because that's something officers are always watching for. An engine turning off can sometimes precede unexpected movement, a door opening, a driver stepping out. And from an officer's standpoint, unexpected movement is one of the biggest risk factors during a stop. So instead of seeing a polite gesture, they may see a shift in control. And control is everything during a traffic stop. There's also a legal layer here that most people completely overlook. When your engine is running, your vehicle is in a state of readiness. You are clearly in the driver's seat, engaged in a traffic stop that was initiated by the officer. The interaction is defined, contained, and predictable. But when you turn off your engine, you subtly change that dynamic. You're no longer just a driver temporarily detained on the road. You're someone who has actively altered the condition of the vehicle during an official stop. That might not sound like a big deal, but in certain situations it can blur the line between passive compliance and independent action. And officers notice that shift immediately. Let's walk through a realistic scenario. You're driving home late at night. You get pulled over for a broken tail light. You pull to the side, turn off your engine, and sit there waiting. Your hands are on the wheel. Everything feels calm. The officer approaches slowly, flashlight scanning the interior. He pauses slightly longer than usual. Then he taps on your window. "Evening. Why'd you shut the vehicle off?" Now you're caught off guard. That wasn't the reaction you expected. "I just thought it would be respectful," you say. He nods, but something in his tone changes. "Go ahead and turn it back on for me." Now your heart rate ticks up. Why? Because the situation just shifted from routine to slightly uncertain. You're now being instructed to reverse your own action, and in that moment, your confidence drops, even if you've done nothing wrong. That's how quickly perception can change. Here's another layer most people don't think about: timing. Traffic stops are highly structured interactions, even though they feel spontaneous. Officers expect certain things to happen in a certain order. You pull over, you remain seated, you keep your hands visible, you wait for instructions. When you act outside that sequence, even with good intentions, you disrupt that rhythm. And disruption, in law enforcement, often equals scrutiny. Now let's talk about something even more important: officer safety protocols. Officers are trained to assume that every stop carries potential risk. That doesn't mean they think you're dangerous. It means they are trained not to take chances. A running engine is predictable. It's stable. It suggests you're staying in place unless instructed otherwise. But when you turn the engine off, you're making a decision on your own. You're changing the environment without being told to. That alone can prompt the officer to reassess the situation. They may start watching your hands more closely. They may slow down their approach. They may even change how they position themselves relative to your vehicle. And all of that happens silently, without you even realizing it. Now here's where drivers often make things worse. The officer asks a simple question: "Where are you coming from tonight?" It's routine, it's conversational, but you're already slightly unsettled from the earlier exchange about the engine. So you answer quickly, maybe too quickly. "Just coming from a friend's house." "Which friend?" Now you hesitate. That hesitation, combined with the earlier unexpected action, starts building a pattern in the officer's mind. And patterns matter, because officers are constantly looking for inconsistencies, not just in what you say, but in how you behave. Turning off your engine might seem like a small detail, but it becomes part of a larger behavioral picture. Let's go deeper into something most people misunderstand: cooperation versus compliance. Drivers often think that being extra cooperative will make the stop go smoother. They'll roll down all windows, turn on interior lights, grab documents immediately, and yes, turn off the engine. But there's a fine line between cooperation and overcompensation. When you do too much too quickly, it can feel unnatural, forced, even rehearsed. And officers pick up on that. They're trained to notice when behavior doesn't match the situation. A calm driver doesn't usually rush through a series of actions before being asked. A confident driver doesn't feel the need to prove compliance in exaggerated ways. So, ironically, trying too hard to appear cooperative can have the opposite effect. Now let's talk about another situation that happens more often than people admit. The officer takes your license and registration. Then they walk back to their vehicle. Minutes pass, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe longer. You're sitting there, engine off, in silence, and something starts creeping in. Uncertainty. Should you restart the car? Will that look suspicious now? What if they think you're trying to leave? What if restarting the engine triggers a reaction? So you stay still, waiting. This is where that initial decision creates a chain reaction. If the engine had remained on, you wouldn't be questioning your next move. The environment would remain consistent. But now, you're second-guessing everything, and that mental pressure can lead to mistakes. Let's shift to another realistic moment. The officer returns, hands you a warning. "All right, just get that tail light fixed." Relief hits instantly. You nod, say thank you. But then, almost as an afterthought, they ask, "Mind if I take a quick look inside your vehicle?" Now your brain is juggling multiple things at once. The stop seemed over. The tension dropped. You're sitting in a car that's off. The interaction feels less formal now, and that's exactly when people make decisions they later regret. Because the environment feels less structured, more conversational, drivers often agree to things they would normally question. That's not accidental. The flow of a traffic stop matters, the structure matters, and small changes, like turning off your engine, can subtly influence how that interaction unfolds. Now let's address something directly. Is it illegal to turn off your engine during a traffic stop? No. In most cases, it's not. But legality isn't the only thing that matters. What matters is how your actions are interpreted in real time by someone who is trained to read behavior under pressure. And that's where the real risk lies. Because traffic stops are not just about laws, they're about perception, control, timing, and communication, often non-verbal. You might be thinking, so what should I do instead? Here's the practical reality. When you're pulled over, your goal is not to impress the officer. It's not to perform. It's not to guess what looks polite. Your goal is to remain predictable. Predictable behavior reduces tension. It reduces uncertainty. It keeps the interaction within expected boundaries. You pull over safely. You keep your hands visible. You wait. That's it. If the officer wants you to turn off the engine, they will tell you. If they want you to step out, they will tell you. If they want documents, they will ask. You don't need to anticipate every step. In fact, trying to do so can create more problems than it solves. Now let's talk about passengers, because this is another area where things get complicated fast. You're driving, you get pulled over, you turn off the engine, your passenger starts whispering, "Why'd you shut it off? Should I say something? Do you think we're in trouble?" The officer approaches and immediately notices movement and conversation inside the vehicle. "Evening. Is everything all right in there?" Now the focus isn't just on you, it's on everyone. Passengers may be questioned. Their responses may be compared to yours. Small inconsistencies can escalate the situation. And again, it all starts with small shifts in behavior. Even tone matters. If an officer senses uncertainty, hesitation, or inconsistency, they may start asking more questions. Not because they've found something wrong, but because they're trying to resolve that uncertainty. And the more questions asked, the more chances there are for things to go sideways. Here's something else people rarely consider. Officers often deal with drivers who try to manipulate perception. People who act overly polite to hide nervousness. People who perform compliance to avoid scrutiny. So when they see behavior that feels slightly off, even if it's harmless, they don't ignore it. They explore it. And exploration leads to deeper interaction, longer stops, more questions, more scrutiny, all from something as simple as turning off your engine. Now imagine a different version of the same stop. You pull over, you leave the engine running, hands visible, calm breathing. The officer approaches. "Evening, do you know why I stopped you?" You respond calmly. "No, officer." The interaction stays clean, linear, predictable, no extra variables, no unexpected actions. That's what you want. Because the less friction you introduce into the situation, the less opportunity there is for it to escalate. There's a reason experienced drivers, attorneys, and even former law enforcement officers often give the same advice. Don't overthink the stop. And turning off your engine is one of those things that comes from overthinking. It feels like you're doing something right, but in reality, you're adding complexity to a situation that benefits from simplicity. Now, I'm not saying that every officer will react negatively if you turn off your engine. Some won't care at all. Some may even appreciate it in certain contexts. But traffic stops are not about what happens sometimes. They're about what can happen. And when you're dealing with law enforcement, minimizing risk is always the smarter approach. Because once a situation shifts, even slightly, it's very hard to bring it back to neutral. And most drivers don't realize that until they're already in the middle of it. So the next time those blue lights hit your mirror and your hand instinctively moves toward the ignition, pause for just a second. Not out of fear, not out of hesitation, but out of awareness. Because that small decision, made in a moment of pressure, can shape the entire interaction in ways you won't fully understand until it's already unfolding.